baking besties, welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how I use my ProFroster. I get loads of questions about this, especially on TikTok and Instagram. So I'm just going to go through how I do it. Everybody does it different. I build my layers up, some people don't, blah, blah, blah. So I'm going to show you how I did it. And I'm going to use this cake as an example. This was a standard height cake. It wasn't anything too tall. So we're not going straight in there with anything massive. So this is just a normal 3-layer cake inside, chocolate cake, no fancy fillings. Really, really simple with a white chocolate ganache. So what we've got here is turntable with a same diameter perspex disc on top, and then, or ganache plate, that's what you call them. Then we've got a 6.25 inch perspex disc attached to that with tape. And then on top of that, we've just got a thin cake card, and that obviously travels with the cake. So that'll come off the ganache plate when we loosen it, which I'll show you how to do. And that goes onto our cake board and sits underneath our cake. So that never leaves the cake. Okay, so I'll link all of these in the description below for you. Everything that I use or as close to as possible, including my turntable, because it's honestly the best one I've ever owned. Even though it's not cheap, it's worth the money. It's really heavy, it's brilliant. So we're going to start out by popping a bit of ganache on our cake card, and then we are going to pop our first layer of cake on. So this just acts as like a nice bit of glue basically. And here we are popping our first layer of cake on, and then we're going to pipe what I'd call a dam of ganache. Okay, so I've made sure that it's central on the card and the disc there. That's really important. And this is now our dam going around the edge. It doesn't need to be super massively neat. You need to have a semi-stiff ganache for this because it needs to build that dam around the edge to ensure that you're not getting any leakage from your fillings. And that's how you're going to make sure that that filling there stays in the middle. So that's my chocolate buttercream going in the middle. If you do need a buttercream recipe, I have got a full tutorial on how I do my buttercream. And then we're just smoothing those sides out to crumb coat it. So we're making sure that no crumbs are going to show through, because this is not having a layer of fondant on it. So we really need to make sure that we're not leaving any crumbs to show through on the final finish. And then just make sure that you don't have any stray ganache around the bottom of the plate, because that will alter the way the ProFroster works when you come to use the ProFroster, which obviously isn't yet, as we need to build up our layers. So we're getting a piece of kitchen towel there just to wipe off any excess crumbs. And now this is going to go into the fridge for about 5 minutes just while we work on the other layers. So now I'm taking another perspex disc and I'm unwrapping my cake. These have been kept in the fridge overnight. So these were baked the day before and popped in the fridge overnight, wrapped in 2 layers of cling film. We're just taking off a greaseproof circle. I'm not using any glue or anything to hold this down. It's just going to stay in place with the moisture on the cake. We don't need it to be really, really firm in place. Okay, but just be mindful of that when you're moving around your kitchen. Again, we're piping around that dam and then also around the side to lock in those crumbs. We don't want any crumbs showing through. I'm a bit sad when it comes to making sure that things are really, really perfect. Or, you know, that's how it should be. But it's each to their own, and obviously if you want a bit of cake showing, then that's a completely different process to what I'm doing here. This is to get a smooth finish so that you don't need to use a fondant. It's not always necessary. Most of my cakes go out just ganache. Okay, so we've popped that middle layer into the fridge for 5 minutes as well. And now we're back and we're doing this one. This is our bottom layer, so that's the one that's got the small perspex plate underneath. And then we're popping our middle layer on that's nice and cool from the fridge. And we're just making sure it's central there. Yes, my hands are clean. No, I don't wear gloves. Don't come at me for it. In the UK, it's advised against for wearing gloves when doing food preparation of this sort in a kitchen, at home, etc. It actually causes more more germ spread to wear gloves than it does to not. And it's against EHO regulations in the UK. So each to their own, but I don't wear them. Okay, my hands are very, very clean. Again, we're wiping that spatula in between each time to make sure that we're not spreading too many crumbs around. This cake recipe that I use isn't terribly crummy. If you've got a really crummy recipe, you'll need to be really, really careful, and will need to wipe that spatula between every time you touch the cake. And obviously you'll need to account for that in the amount of ganache you make as well. So what we're doing here is the crumb coat. We're not trying to get a perfect finish. We're not going to use that ProFroster yet. We're just locking in the crumbs, and then we're going to pop this back in the fridge for another 5 to 10 minutes until it feels firm to the touch and it doesn't wobble around. If you've got soft fillings in it like jams and jellies and things like that, curds, etc., it'll probably take a little bit longer to stop wobbling. But with just a buttercream filling or a ganache filling, it is a lot quicker. So this one will only probably need 10 minutes, whereas you might need half an hour for one with jams and jellies in and things like that. Okay, so just bear that in mind, and you sort of get used to it the more you do it. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take our ProFroster. We're not using it yet, but we're just going to line it up. Okay, so on the inside of the ProFroster, which you can't currently see, you've got little notches, and this is a genuine ProFroster. This is not a copy. You can see there's a small gap, probably half a centimetre on the top, from the top of the cake to the bottom of the ProFroster, and that's to ensure that we get a nice even distribution of ganache all the way around the cake. And now I'm just checking that none of the edges rub against it either. And then we're going to pop that back in the fridge for another, like I say, 10 minutes or so. And now we're going to go in with a proper layer of ganache, and we're going to use our ProFroster. So again, I'm just double checking that it's not catching or anything like that, because you don't want it to catch on the cake, because that's where you're going to get crumbs. And this is a fairly soft mix. I've softened my ganache up slightly. Now the way I do it, I lock the top edge in first. So I'm aiming for that 90-degree angle on the corner of the cake before I go and work my way down. If you've watched any of my time lapses or any of my TikTok videos, I do quite a few of those where I time lapse cakes and using the ProFroster, and I get a lot of questions about it on there, hence why I made this video for you, to kind of show you how I do it, because everybody's different, and some people like to literally toss on a load of buttercream or ganache and just swipe it off again. I don't find that gives me a very neat finish. Like I say, I'm quite fussy. I want it really, really neat. So I'm locking that top edge in. It will leave a divot in the centre, and that's totally normal. I didn't realise that when I first got it, and then I watched a few videos and I was like, oh right, okay, because I thought, well, I'm doing something wrong. Why am I getting this divot in the middle? Why is it not completely smooth across the top? But it won't. It will leave a ring in the middle that you've got to come back and fill in. But it's dead simple to do, and I'll show you at the end how I do that as well. But again, we are still trying to lock in that edge. This is the bit that takes the time. This takes quite a while. This is all filmed in real time. I've not sped any of this up or slowed it down or anything. You can see I'm not using the ProFroster loads and loads. I'm not putting a bit on, taking it off, putting it on, taking it off. But I am backwards and forwards, but not every time I put something on. So it's just, you kind of learn where you need to be with it and what technique works best for you. I've tried loads of different techniques. I've tried slapping it all off and pulling it off and going round, and I don't like that technique. It ends up really, really messy for me. I've tried layers. Layers works quite well. Layers is quite good when you're first starting out as well. But this technique I've just found gives me the neatest finish. So always locking in that top and side around the top, about 1.5 inches down or so. And this works exactly the same if you're doing it on a really tall cake or if you're doing it on a slightly smaller cake. Works the same. It's no different. I follow this same process when I am covering in fondant as well. I'd still make sure that I do it absolutely as neat as I can, because the neater it is underneath the fondant, the neater your fondant will be, and the easier your job will be when you come to cover it in fondant as well, or sugar paste, whatever you want to call it. I always call it fondant. I don't like the word sugar paste. I don't know why. I'm rambling. If you're new here, I ramble. If you're not, hey, enjoy my rambles. So yeah, we're still going around that top. Like I say, this is filmed in real time. I've not sped it up. We might get to the point where we speed it up if I run out of things to say to you. But yeah, so we're still going around, like I say, filling in gaps, and you can see now, you can see that divot starting to form in the centre. And that's what we're going to come back at the end and fill in, so don't worry about that. But you can see there now where that edge is really starting to come in, and it's really getting that nice 90-degree effect. And you could probably, some people might be happy leaving it on that last one and carrying on down the cake. But I'm just going back to fill in some little bits that I've seen that will just bug me. Some people might not do. I'm also really quite careful when I place the ProFroster against the cake. I don't whack it in. I sort of put the bottom edge in and then slide the top on. I don't slap it on because you'll leave a line in the cake where you've gone slightly forward. You also need to make sure that when you're pulling it around the edge, this is why I always make sure I've got that ganache disc on the bottom. When you're pulling it around, you keep it firmly in place on the board. Make sure you're not leaning forward slightly because it's really easy to do. The first few weeks when I got it, I accidentally leant it in slightly and ended up with a cake that was slightly thinner at the top than it was at the bottom. No one probably would have noticed, but I know. And when I looked at the pictures, I could see it. And it was really, really very slight. The cake was still fully covered and it looked really, really nice. It just, for me, I could see that it had gone in very, very slightly at the top. Some people don't use the ganache disc at the bottom, and I will say it does slightly damage your ProFroster at the bottom because they're not made to be used with the ganache disc. But I find this is the absolute best way to get a really, really neat finish. And like I say, I'm just so fussy on it being really, really neat. I wouldn't want to send anything out that I personally wouldn't want myself. So it's got to be fully neat for me. I've used normal gel colours to colour my ganache because you don't need to use specialist chocolate colouring colours when you add in the cream in there. Obviously, ganache is an emulsion of cream and chocolate. And for white chocolate ganache, I do 3:1. For a 6-inch 3-layer cake, I'll do a full pot of cream, which in the UK is 300ml, that's double cream, and 900 grams of white chocolate chopped up, and I make mine in the microwave. I do it on about half power, which is about 600 on mine, and I put both in the bowl, plastic bowl, and I zap it for about 1.5 minutes, and then I leave it to stand for a minute, stir, and basically just keep going back, and then the next time I'll do it for a minute, and then a minute, and a minute, and a minute. The only time I do 1.5 minutes is the first time. And I'll leave it to stand for at least a minute in between, and that leaving it to stand is key so it doesn't get too hot. When it gets too hot, that's when you burn it, and that's when you burn the chocolate, and that's how you end up with split ganache or lumps in your ganache because you burnt the chocolate because the cream is getting too hot. Some people heat the cream up and then use that to melt the chocolate. I don't like that technique. For me, it doesn't work. For me, I've honed doing it in the microwave. I've tried it all different ways. I've tried it in the stand mixer. I've tried it, which worked quite well, but you have to heat everything through so that you're not using cold tools, etc. I've tried the stand and wait method. Don't like that one for me, personally. You need to chop your chocolate really, really fine for that method to work really well, which is very, very time consuming. Whereas in the microwave, I can just chop it into the pieces it comes in, sort of thing. I usually whack it on the side of the surface or break it all up inside the packet. Never open the packet and break it up because that hurts your fingers and takes ages. Always do it inside the packet. Sometimes I used to whack it with the rolling pin, but you also end up with uneven pieces then. At least by breaking it down across the bits that are already across it, the shape, I don't know what you call it. I'm rambling again, but you sort of end up with a neater and easier way to do it. So now you can see we've worked down the cake. I totally missed that bit. Sorry, you were listening to me ramble, but you can see what I'm doing. Work down the cake in the same way I did the top, working downwards, filling in the gaps. Obviously, you're putting a larger amount on first when you're first going down from the top once you've got that edge in, and then coming down the cake and building out the layers, filling in small gaps. You'll find sometimes you'll have a little gap and actually takes loads to fill it because of the way it scrapes it off. Not loads, but far more than you would anticipate it needing. Now, sometimes I get to this sort of point here and I'll go around it again and it's still not coming off clean. That's the point at which I would normally say, you can kind of just wing it, you can tell when it's not coming together quite right. and you go, right, I'm going to stop now, and what I'm going to actually do is put it in the fridge and come back again. Once you put it in the fridge and it's firmed up, it's really easy to fill in those gaps, but obviously sometimes you haven't got enough time to do that. Sometimes you're getting fed up and you just want it to be done. That does happen, even though it's, you know, a hobby career in air quotes. You still lose your temper with it a bit sometimes, or you're getting fed up, or you just want to be done, or it's Friday or Saturday or Sunday afternoon and you're just ready to be done. But you can tell if you're going to have to go in for another layer or not. And that kind of just comes from experience. If you've gone round it a lot and you're almost there, but you just can't quite get rid of those few, that's where I would say step away, walk away, put it in the fridge, leave it 10 minutes, let it firm up, come back. You'll probably do another 2 wipes around it with a tiny bit of extra ganache on, and it'll be done and it'll be fully finished. And you just needed to step away for a minute and let it sit, and filling in those gaps is much easier on the firmer ganache. You can see now it's almost there. There's one tiny bit that I can see as I roll it round. But other than that, it's pretty much there. So what we do is we fill in the top, which I will show you how to do. I'm going to flip it over for you in a minute. One last wipe, and there we go. So that is almost done. And now we're going to do the top. So we're going to use that same ganache. We've not put it in the fridge yet, we don't need to. That top will be quite firm by the time you've finished the sides. And all we're doing is using an angled spatula and filling in that gap and keeping it as flat to the cake as we can. We're angling it towards us, but the length of the spatula is kept flat against the cake. Okay, and I'll link my favourite spatulas for you as well. I always use the smaller ones, which are the 9-inch spatulas, not the really, really long ones. I find those easier to make mistakes with. You won't get it fully, completely flat. You could use a bench scraper to get rid of some imperfections, but I don't find it necessary. I'm usually covering the tops of the cakes anyway, which was the case here as well. So now I'm going to show you how I get, once we pop that in the fridge, by the way, I'm going to show you how I get the cake off the ganache plates. Okay, so I'm covering a spare Perspex disc, at least a couple of inches bigger than the cake. That one's a 10-inch disc. Okay, in cling film or saran wrap if you're American, popping it on the top, and then we're going to flip it like this. Dead easy. Okay, and now we're going to keep it upside down, and I've only took it on and off the turntable to keep it in frame for you. I would normally leave it on. I've used a knife to wedge up that larger Perspex disc on the top. Normally I would have just put it straight back onto this turntable. And now I'm going to run a knife. If you're unsure of this, you can use a warm knife. I didn't, I just used a cold knife. But it's quite sharp. Run it around the top, all the way around, so that you get a neat edge. And then we're popping some ganache, so don't throw that ganache away. Popping some ganache on the bottom so that you can see our cake card there. And this is our finished board, our final board. I used the thin ones, and that's a 10-inch board. This is a 6-inch cake. Okay, and we're just making sure it's in the centre. It's cold from the fridge, so it's really, really firm. I'm not putting fingerprints on it or anything like that. Take our top Perspex disc off, and there it is, it's on. And now my little bonus at the end here, I'm going to show you how I decorated this one as well. So I'm using some red buttercream. Again, my buttercream video is on here. I think it's the one back from this. It was only a recent addition. And we're using an open star tip here. I'll link the exact tip for you down below. It's an Ateco tip. I prefer the Ateco tip. I didn't film doing the Spider-Man spider webby thing, and I don't know why I didn't film that. I'm going to blame my kids, because, you know, it's easy to blame them. We're just keeping really nice even pressure as we do that around the top. No, there's nothing dead difficult. I always thought when I first saw it that it was going to be really difficult, but it's not, honestly. And piping a spare bit of buttercream in the top there, because we're going to pop some sprinkles in there, and it just gives them something to grip onto, so that when the client comes to slice it, the sprinkles don't end up absolutely everywhere. And they don't get in trouble with their party people and hall or whatever they are. So I'm popping a sprinkletti blue mix in the top because it's a Spider-Man cake. and also some red balls and some lighter blue balls as well. I'll link all of them that I've used if you like them down below for you. And I'm just pushing them in slightly so that they stick to that buttercream, so they don't move about too much. You don't want things swaying around in the box and ending up the client with loads of sprinkles in the bottom of their box. And then I just winged it with some spiders around the edge with the little purple middle like they are in the actual movie. I did have to check with my 11-year-old that was right, even though I'm a Marvel fan. I was like, here's Purple, the spider that bites Peter Parker, isn't it? She's like, yeah, Mum, of course it is. You know, leave me alone. I'm YouTubing or whatever she does. I don't know. She's 11. I'm rambling. Sorry. And then we're popping some ribbon around the bottom, and I just secure this to itself, not to the cake, with a glue dot. I always like thin ribbon. I prefer a thin ribbon. I think the thin ribbon with the thin cake board looks really, really nice against each other. But like I say, I'm not securing it against the cake. You need to make sure it's flat as well, because you'll struggle to push it down the cake once it's on. And it's just secured to itself, so it's dead easy for the client to take it off as well. And then, I don't know what I did here, but I put the toppers in and I didn't adjust the camera. I didn't check my angle. So you can't fully see what I'm doing because I'm stupid. But these toppers I source from a local company. So obviously just find your local topper maker. I'm sure there's plenty. There's so many talented people out there. But hey presto, we are done. Hope you enjoy. Don't forget to like and share. And also follow me for more videos regularly. I'm not going to say weekly because I'm rubbish at uploading, but regularly. And if you like the rambling, please let me know in the comments. If you didn't, then don't worry about it. Don't be nasty. Yeah, thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye.